Minnesota. Welcome to the June edition of the SSIS Coffee Talk on placement entry in SSIS. I am Ross Stack. I'll be your host today. I am an e-learning instructional designer with the Learning and Development of SSIS User Support, which is in the Business Integrations Division of DCYF. This is an action-packed day of information, so I'm going to get started with the agenda. We'll go over that. We'll have welcome and introductions, which basically I just did. And introductions will occur when each speaker starts. They will present themselves and introduce themselves. We'll go over the housekeeping and Tennyson warning. We'll have some announcements. And then we're going to get into the placement entry in SSIS, including placement authority and continuous placements, placement entry, specific placement entry, including youth, missing from care, crisis respite, QRTP placements, psychiatric residential treatment facility entering placements, and then we'll give you some SSIS resources and close out for the day. For our housekeeping, all attendees have been muted upon entry. To speak, please raise your hand and use the reaction emoji at the bottom of your screen, and you will be unmuted by our panelists. Questions can also be submitted using the chat feature, which will be monitored by our SSIS Business Ops staff. Closed captioning can be enabled using the CC button located on the bottom left of your screen. And this session is being recorded and will be posted on the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy website in the near future. A follow-up document will be prepared and distributed to attendees 7 to 10 days following this WebEx event. This is the Tennyson warning. Because we are recording, you need to understand what your rights are. Go ahead and take a minute to read this over, and I'll be back on in a second. Hopefully that was enough time for you to read over this warning. We're going to get started, and the first thing we're going to talk about is Miss Heidi will give us the Mentor of the Month.
Thanks, Ross. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to share that June's SSIS Mentor of the Month is St. Louis County's Melissa Berglund. Nominated by the SSIS Business Section at DCYF, Melissa consistently demonstrates the true spirit of mentorship, always going above and beyond. Her dedication to providing complete and accurate information, her thorough research before responding, and her exceptionally professional and proactive communication style make her an outstanding mentor and a valued resource to her colleagues. So thank you and congratulations, Melissa. And if you have a mentor in your agency that you'd like to nominate, please send me an email. I'll put the address in the chat so all of you have that available. And I hope all of you have a great day. Back to you, Ross.
Thanks, Heidi. Congratulations, Melissa. And next up, we'll have, I believe, Mr. Kratt talk about some updates.
Thanks, Ross. I'm actually going to let Cynthia go first because her computer is about to shut down on her. So I'm going to hand it over to her real quick.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I got the automated restart. So wanted to just share with folks a little bit about our SSIS modernization and where we're at. I know we have a full schedule, so I'll keep this very brief. We had a excellent legislative session. Our folks legislators from around the state really have a good understanding of how important it is to modernize the system. So as a section right now, we're really focused on making sure that we can do three things at once. Provide user support, continue to make updates, and really attend to anything that will be adding value to the current system, and continue with that work that we've started with the paperwork reduction. And then start our pivot to modernization, where we're going to be really focused on getting ready for modernization. And at this point, what that will look like is a lot of work, a lot of engagement. So for our mentors here today, that will be highly important for you guys to be a part of that, because you are such key partners for that work, as well of course, the users of all sorts of types at the local agencies of SSIS. So we we have a RFO, couldn't remember that acronym, an RFO right now that folks have heard about, and while that is going on, we'll be concurrently doing other readiness activities. So look forward to much more information about that, and stay tuned to the updates and our SSIS Engagement HQ for updates on modernization and all of those activities, like our time entry transformation and other activities. So, and if anybody has questions about that anytime, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always around on email. So thank you so much. Thanks for letting me go, Eric.
Hey, no problem. Just want to touch on a couple things before we move on into the presentation. I know we have a lot to cover. The top bullet point on this slide is talking about the SSIS training sandbox. Information related to the SSIS agency training sandbox can be found with the link associated with that top bullet point. Over on the right-hand side of the page, toward the top, you'll see a lot of materials related to the SSIS training sandbox, including the high-level overview, an information sheet, an FAQ, and also information about how your agency can request access to the SSIS agency training sandbox. I did post one of the recordings also toward the top right of this page on Engagement HQ. So if you're looking for more information and you are an eligible agency to access the training sandbox, you can take a look at that and reach out to me if you have any questions. The next thing I want to talk about in the second bullet point is that we are hiring for a few positions in the SSIS section. There is a link to the Minnesota Careers job website located next to the second bullet point. And the positions we are hiring for is a backfill for Alex Mentes for the SSIS Business Operations Manager. We're also hiring a backfill for Cynthia's former position as the SSIS Business Operations Supervisor. And we are also hiring for a child welfare financial consultant to report to Cynthia on the modernization team. So take a look at those if you're interested and reach out with questions. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Eric. Without any further ado, we're going to get started. So I believe Allie's up first.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Good morning, everybody. My name is Allie Tessmer, and I'm a subject matter expert with the SSIS Business Operations team here at DCYF. So as a Title IV agency, we're federally mandated to report detailed information on children's living arrangements for every out-of-home care episode. Today's presentation will focus on how to accurately enter placement information into SSIS in a way that aligns with the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis and Reporting System, commonly known as AFCARS, and its requirements. We will cover key areas including placement authority and continuous placements, understanding what establishes a placement episode and how continuity is maintained, placement entry, the foundational steps to correctly enter a placement in SSIS, specialized placement scenarios, including how to document when a youth is missing from care, when crisis respite is provided, and how to enter placements into specific settings such as qualified residential treatment programs or QRTPs and psychiatric residential treatment facilities or PRTFs. right, so we'll dive right into placement entry. The definition here comes directly from Minnesota statutes 260C.007, subdivision 18. It's the legal foundation for how we define foster care in the state of Minnesota. Key elements here are the child is placed away from their parent or guardian, although there are two scenarios when it's considered foster care: when a child is with a parent, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. The care is for more than 24 hours, or the local service agency has legal responsibility for both placement and ongoing care decisions. It's important to remember that foster care isn't limited to just traditional foster homes. It also includes placements in shelters, group homes, residential treatment centers, and other licensed settings. This definition is central when determining reporting responsibilities, program eligibility, and how placements are recorded in SSIS. Before a child can be placed in foster care, the agency must have legal authority to do so. There are four main types of placing authority you'll encounter. Number one is a protective hold. This is a temporary emergency hold initiated by law enforcement or tribal agency, usually under the child protection emergency. It allows the child to be placed immediately, but must be followed by judicial review within the required time frame, which is typically 72 hours. Number two would be a district court order. This is the most common authority type and comes through child protection or delinquency court proceedings. The order must include placement and care responsibility granted to the agency. Court orders are required for ongoing placements and for 4E eligibility. Number three, a tribal court order. For children under the jurisdiction of a tribal court order provides the legal basis for placement. It functions similarly to a district court order, but is issued by the tribal judicial system. Collaboration with the tribal social services is key in these cases. Number four, voluntary placement agreement, or a VPA. This is used when a parent agrees to a placement, typically for developmental disabilities or access to treatment for a child. It must be signed by both parents and the agency and reviewed by the court if the placement extends beyond 180 days. The placement authority is entered on the Continuous Placement Authority tab and should be updated if or when it changes. It's critical that placement data is entered into SSIS within 30 days of a child's placement in specific situations. This helps ensure timely and accurate reporting. These situations include when a child is placed in a 72-hour protective hold, when the county or tribal social services agency has legal placing authority, whether it's through a voluntary placement agreement or a court order. Sometimes there are two agencies involved, with one being the legally responsible agency and the other being the financially responsible agency. Only the financially responsible agency should have the continuous placement entered into their SSIS. We'll go over how the legally responsible agency can enter the placement later in this presentation. When the tribal social services agency has placing authority, but the county social services agency holds financial responsibility, regardless of whether a 4E maintenance agreement is in place. When corrections has placing authority and the county social services agency operates under the same administrative umbrella as corrections. And when corrections has placing authority and a Title 4E maintenance agreement exists between corrections and the county social services agency. Prompt entry supports compliance with federal and state requirements, helps secure funding, and ensures the child's placement is accurately tracked. Okay, continuous placements. When does it start and end? A foster care episode is the period during which a child is considered to be in foster care for legal and federal reporting purposes. It begins the date the agency receives legal placement authority. This could be through the court order, protective hold, or voluntary placement agreement. The episode remains open as long as the agency retains legal authority for the child's placement and care. The foster care episode ends when the agency no longer has that legal authority. This can happen in several different ways. First, being reunification with the removal parents. If the child is returned to the parent or parents from whom they were originally removed, and the court formally ends the foster care placement, the episode ends. It is not enough for the child to simply return home. The court must end the agency's authority. Next one is placement with the non-removal parent. If the court orders the child to live with a non-removal parent or a parent who is not part of the original removal, the foster care episode ends. This is not considered a foster care placement. And finally, with a finalized permanency arrangement. The episode also ends when a child exits foster care through a permanency decision, such as a transfer of permanent legal and physical custody, or TPLPC, to a relative, or a finalized adoption. These outcomes signify that the child is no longer under the agency's foster care authority. Accurately entering the start and end dates for a foster care episode in SSIS is essential for AFCAR's reporting, for e-claiming, and ensuring compliance with both state and federal law. We'll now review some critical fields on the continuous placement screen in SSIS. The start date is when the agency receives placement authority, which may differ from the actual placement start. The entry date is auto-filled and not editable. It must be entered within 30 days of the start date to avoid an AFCARS error. Excuse me. If missed, there is no fix, so it's crucial to enter it timely. The target population identifies the child's population according to the primary reason for removal. The supervising agency can be county social services, tribal social services, or corrections. If you select tribal, you'll be required to choose the supervising tribe. Remember to update this if agency oversight changes. The effective date for the original supervising agency is the continuous placement start date. For the effective date, when there is a change in supervising agency, if that change is to corrections, use the date the court or agency assigns supervision to corrections. To tribal social services agencies, use the date the tribal court order is issued. And for county social services agencies, use the date the decision is made by the court or the agency. For the reason discharged, select the appropriate discharge reason from the dropdown, and the discharge date marks when the agency no longer has that placement authority. The discharge entry date, like the entry date, must be entered within 30 days to prevent irreversible AFCARS errors. Just a hint, there's a blue underline help text throughout the continuous placement screen, so you can always click on those links for more information. Okay. When entering data in SSIS, it's important to understand the distinction between placements, locations, and absences within a child's continuous foster care episode. A continuous placement entry in SSIS requires documentation of the child's setting and a corresponding reason for that setting. We will discuss these later in the presentation, as each setting is classified into one of three categories based on the type of setting or where the setting and reason combination. One, a placement. This is a setting where the child is in a living arrangement, such as a foster home, group home, or residential treatment center. A child must have at least one placement recorded during the continuous placement dates for the episode. 2, location. Locations may exist within the dates of a continuous placement or may be entered for tracking purposes when an agency does not have placing authority. Examples may include a hospital stay or a respite stay. This also includes trial home visits. And the third is the absence. Absences track times when the child is temporarily not physically present in the placement, such as youth missing from care. A continuous placement episode in SSIS must include at least one valid placement entry. Sometimes agencies need to track where a child is living or staying even when they do not have legal placement authority over the child. In these cases, SSIS can be used to record the child's location, but these entries are not associated with a continuous placement episode in SSIS. Common scenarios include courtesy supervision requests, when another agency requests courtesy supervision to monitor the child temporarily, or the agency is providing courtesy supervision and does not hold financial responsibility, or SSIS is tracking the location, but no continuous placement episode is entered. 2, if there is an interstate compact on the placement of child, or ICPC. When the child is placed from another state and the receiving agency accepts placement under ICPC, the child's location is tracked, but legal placement authority and financial responsibility remains with the sending state. And third, split responsibility cases. The agency has legal placement authority for the child, but another agency holds financial responsibility for the placement. SSIS tracks the placement location, but the continuous placement is managed carefully to reflect this split. It's important to remember one agency is responsible for the entire continuous placement episode. Agencies cannot split the financial responsibility. These locations only entries ensure the child's whereabouts and case information are current and accessible without triggering foster care episode requirements for federal reporting. In situations where the agency does not have financial responsibility for a child, workers must answer key questions in SSIS placement entry, or a key question, my apologies. On the placement screen, there is a question. Does another agency or state have financial responsibility for this child? Courtesy supervision by this agency. For the situation we discussed previously, courtesy supervision, ICPC placements from another state, or split responsibility cases, this question must be answered yes. Answering yes here ensures that the system recognizes the agency is providing supervision or tracking, but is not financially responsible for that placement. While foster care typically means a child is placed away from their parent or guardian, there are 2 specific exceptions when a child may be considered in foster care while still living with a parent. Number 1, co-located in a licensed residential sub-treatment program. And this applies when a parent and child are placed together in a licensed family-based residential substance use disorder treatment program. Even though the child is physically with their parent, it still counts as a foster care placement. These settings are structured to support family preservation while providing treatment. The agency is paying the treatment center similar to a foster parent, and there is a court order in accordance with the Minnesota state statute. This placement is documented in SSIS with a continuous placement, and that agency maintains placement and care responsibility for the child. The court-ordered trial home visit. A child home visit occurs when court orders the child to return to the parent home for the purpose of a trial home visit. The child is still in foster care during this time, but the agency retains legal authority and continuous placement remains open. This is a transitional step before full reunification and must be carefully monitored and documented. In both of these scenarios, the agency must continue to provide case management and oversight, and the placement remains a part of the child's continuous placement episode in SSIS for federal reporting purposes. When a child is ordered by the court to live in the home of a non-custodial parent, meaning the parent who is not involved in the original removal, this placement is not considered foster care. In SSIS, this type of arrangement is always recorded as a location, not a placement. When a child moves from a foster home or other placement setting to their non-custodial parent's home, this is considered the end of the continuous placement in SSIS. In this case, you'll need to close the placement and choose residing with non-removal parent/guardian as the discharge reason. If a child was ordered into the home of their non-custodial parent, and that's the only living arrangement, do not enter a continuous placement at all. Remember, continuous placements are only used when the child is in foster care. However, there is flexibility to help you track the child's progress. You can choose to add the non-custodial parent's home as an optional placement entry in the placement location or absences folder. And this can be useful for monitoring permanency timelines and keeping a clear record of the child's living situation. For additional guidance on working with non-custodial or unadjudicated parents, see the new practice guide, which we'll provide the link for later in the presentation. And now we're going to pause for any questions that folks have.
I see there's a question about reviewing protective supervision and what is needed for the removal of a child under court order protective supervision. We're not going to be going over that today, but if you do have questions about that, it would be helpful for you to either consult with your 4E eligibility trainer or contact the foster care policy unit. And we can put the email for that unit in the chat. Absences in a treatment center with the VPA, do overnight visits need to be entered as an absence? Agency remains financially responsible to hold the bed in these cases. It is best practice to enter overnight visits. There is a setting that is included authorized temporary locations. What if we have custody of the child? Oh, I just lost the question. What if we have custody of the child when the child is placed with the non-custodial parent? Typically, again, because foster care is not with foster care includes when a child is away from a parent. So if you have questions about that specific court order, we still advise that the continuous placement needs to end because they are not in foster care, because they are with the parent. But again, you can email the foster care policy unit if you have any questions specific about that court order. Does the non-custodial parent need to be legal as an adjudicated? No, and that does go over that in that new best practice guide for working with non-custodial or non-adjudicated parents. So there's really great information on that. Is entering a non-custodial location an option, or is this a requirement to track placement timelines? It is an option just for you to, it is not a requirement. I see there's a question about crisis respite. We are going to go over entry into a crisis respite, and we can hopefully we answer your question then. If with a non-custodial parent, do we use in-home case plan even though we may have custody? Again, you know, the important thing to remember is just you can discuss with foster care policy the custody part, but you would complete an in-home case plan, not an out-of-home placement plan. If a child is removed for less than 24 hours, should the continuous placement still be entered in SSIS? No, it does not need to be entered if it's less than 24 hours. And are there any questions in the Q&A that need to be answered? I see there is a question, a specific question about a 35-day eval that the court order reads. I think that just because you're talking about a specific case, I would suggest either emailing the help desk or foster care policy for guidance on how to handle that specific case. If a child is with a non-custodial parent under a court order, I understand that placement closes, but if the child was court ordered to non-custodial parent and has to be removed again and placed back into foster care, what authority is needed for removal? So that would be considered a new removal. So you would need a court order or protective hold, depending on the circumstances, with all the new 4E requirements in that court order. Follow-up question, do we still pay the foster parent since the child was with them less than 24 hours? That would be up to your agency. Okay, if there's any other questions, just keep putting them in there and we have a lot of information, so we will get moving on placement entry. Okay, placement location absences are critical for ensuring that every aspect of a child's living arrangement is recorded accurately. Workers must ensure that there are no gaps, meaning each continuous placement must be fully accounted for using appropriate entries in the placement location absence folder. Federal reporting through AFGARS depends on this data, including who foster caregivers are and where the child is physically located. So the placement setting must also be entered in SSIS and reflect the child's current living arrangement and is a key point for federal reporting. Because AFGARS requires accurate, up-to-date data, every change in a child's living arrangement must be recorded in SSIS. This means each time a child or youth moves to a new setting, whether it's a new foster home, a group home, or even a temporary absence, a new placement location absence screen must be completed. This practice ensures that the child's placement history is complete and accurate for reporting, funding, and case management purposes. When entering a placement in SSIS, it's important to understand the role of placement reasons. The placement reason indicates why the child is in that specific setting. It explains the purpose or legal basis for the placement. A reason must always be selected whenever a placement setting is chosen. The reason field cannot be left blank and is required for data accuracy and federal reporting. Not all placement reasons in SSIS apply to every setting. Because of this, the drop-down list of reasons is filtered based on the selected setting. This filtering helps guide workers to select only relevant reasons, which reduces errors and improves data quality. Accurate matching of setting and reason is crucial because it affects foster care episode tracking, influence for reclaiming and reimbursing, and ensures compliance with AFGARS reporting requirements. So there are a couple of changes that were recently made to SSIS in the last SSIS release. And one of them was that safety and stability was removed from a couple of the settings. And this was because during recent quality assurance reviews of SSIS placement data, DCYF has observed that the placement reason safety and stability was often used as a catch-all option. In many cases, the reason did not accurately reflect the child's actual placement setting or circumstances for their placement. This mismatch raised data integrity concerns because placement reasons need to clearly align with both the setting and the child's situation. To address this, the setting reasons have been revised and better aligned with placement settings, especially in residential programs, juvenile correction facilities, and group homes. These changes aim to improve the accuracy of data and ensure compliance with federal reporting requirements. Another change that was made due to those recent reviews also showed that the use of respite as a placement reason was often inconsistent with policy expectations. It's important to clarify that respite care is not considered a foster care placement. It's a short-term temporary arrangement intended to provide relief for caregivers. Respite care must have a clearly identified return date, meaning the child or youth is expected to return either to their home or their regular foster care placement. Because of this, respite can now only be used in conjunction with the authorized temporary location setting in SSIS. When a child is in respite during a continuous placement episode, there must be an active placement that remains open. This is the placement that the child is expected to return to after the respite ends. Ensuring these rules are followed helps maintain accurate data, prevents inadvertent foster care placement errors, and supports proper federal reporting and funding. Then this slide here just shows the additional changes that were made to the placement settings and reasons in the SSIS 25.2 release. And these will be available on the PowerPoint slide. So placement classification. When workers enter the placement and setting on the placement location absence screen in SSIS, the system automatically calculates the classification of that placement. This classification determines whether the entry is considered a placement, location, or absence. Workers should always verify the classification to ensure accurate data entry. Occasionally, when entering placement data in SSIS, the system may display the classification as unknown. This indicates that the combination of placement setting and reason is invalid or does not meet system criteria. When this happens, it is important for workers to stop and verify the accuracy of the selected setting and reasons. This often happens when a worker maybe has initially the setting and reason entered and then go to change the setting but don't delete the reason in the system, and that reason remains. It's just important that when this happens, workers stop and verify the accuracy of that selected setting and reason. Incorrect classification can lead to data entry errors, inaccurate federal reporting, and funding issues. For detailed guidance on valid placement setting and reason combinations, workers should refer to the placement classification document, which is on page 18 in the Entering Child Foster Care Placement in SSIS manual. This ensures correct entries and helps maintain data integrity and compliance with reporting requirements. So next we want to talk about the BizOrg provider. The BizOrg provider field on the placement location absence screen records the foster care home or facility providing the out-of-home care for children. There are several things to look at in ensuring that the BizOrg is accurate, the business organization data is accurate. One is to ensure proper placement tracking. Accurate BizOrg details links the child or youth to the correct foster care or residential provider. It supports federal reporting compliance. Critical data like licenses and addresses feed into AFCAR's and Title IV reporting requirements. It facilitates correct payments. Accurate vendor and license info ensure timely and proper reimbursement for services, and it prevents errors and delays. Inaccurate or incomplete BizOrg information can cause placement errors, payment delays, and compliance issues. So the next couple slides will go over how to enter new BizOrgs for foster homes. I'm just going to read through these real quick. After the vendor is imported, so the new vendor must first be entered. So after the vendor is imported or manually entered by tribal agencies, there are important next steps to complete on the BizOrg record. One is adding the physical location in SSIS. The payment address and payment phone will import automatically, but the physical address is required for AFGARs, so that must be entered. And then from the action menu, you need to select a new foster care or daycare provider, and this adds a new tab to the BizOrg record. On this tab, you will fill out fields such as 4E eligible checkbox, foster family setting, school district, family structure, and registered child care provider. This process also creates subfolders under the BizOrg called individual providers. And this is where foster parents should be added, linking them to the vendor record so they will appear in the placement record under the foster parent tab. Finally, the BizOrg name should always display on the placement screen for clarity and accurate reporting. A lot of information on that one. When creating a BizOrg record in SSIS for residential programs and other placement settings, there are several key steps to follow. One, always verify the license pulled from Lindex to ensure it matches the placement and service being provided. This is critical for compliance and accurate reporting. Confirm the physical address is correct and reflects the actual location of the program. Use the Title 4E group provider search in SSIS to find important information such as the license number, 4E code, and applicable rates for facility placements and placing agency administrative payments. Excuse me. The DHS licensing information lookup tool is also useful for verifying facility license types and services offered. It can also help locate licensed family foster homes. It is a tool that is available via DHS website, and there's a link on the slide. Also, our financial department publishes the Title 40 foster care per diem rate and percentage report quarterly. This report is an excellent reference for Title 40 eligibility facilities and their rates. You can find these reports on County Link under Fiscal Reporting and Accounting, listed by quarter at the bottom of the page. Again, following these steps ensures accuracy in placement data, eligibility, and payment processes. Then the next, I'm not going to go over this one, but this one just shows how to, the steps to add the Lindex into the license. I'm sorry, into the BizOrg. Any questions? I see there's a question. Can you further review the respite PowerPoint page with the lens of a child who is in crisis respite through the waiver? We actually have a whole section on crisis respite that we will be going over. Anybody, are there any other questions that I missed? If not, if so, just shout out and let me know. Okay, now we are going to go over youth missing from care. The Department of Children, Youth and Families will now use missing instead of runaway to describe a child's status. This change avoids assumptions about the reasons for their absence, which may not be relevant and can lead to biased views about their experiences, safety, or willingness to return. These changes have been made in SSIS to also reflect this. So we used to have under unauthorized absence, runaway, and removed by those individuals. These reasons were removed and were replaced with the following reasons: able to locate unapproved setting, absent and unable to be located, and absent and unable to be located runaway. There's more information on that on the slide. and when the debriefing form is required. But for more information about children and youth missing from foster care, visit the Children and Youth Missing from Foster Care DCYF Bulletin, which is linked on the PowerPoint. Also note that the question that was on the placement screen that was previously titled Runaway Debriefing Form Completed, this has now been revised to reflect the language change and is called Missing Episode Debriefing Completed. This question is required to be answered upon ending an unauthorized absence in SSIS when the absent reasons are absent and unable to be located other, and absent and unable to be located runaway. And then when a youth or child is located or returned to foster care after a missing episode or is discharged while still missing from care, the agency must complete the missing episode debriefing form. This is required for all children and youth in foster care, including youth in ages 18 to 21 in extended foster care. This form replaces the runaway debriefing form and can be found in documents under the chronology folder. And then just a note, if discharged from care, provide a brief summary in how the child youth was located or returned to care in that section. Any questions on missing youth? All right, then we will move on to crisis respite. Okay, right. Crisis respite under home and community-based services can be provided in a variety of licensed settings, including family, child foster homes, child foster residence settings, adult foster homes, or community residential settings that have a variance, or in MDH licensed hotels when appropriate. It is important to note that the function of crisis respite has shifted over time. Instead of just a brief short-term relief for caregivers, children are now often placed in crisis respite for longer durations. This is often because they are waiting for a residential placement or a foster resident setting to become available. So when is respite considered foster care? Crisis respite is a foster care placement when at admission into a community residential or crisis respite facility, there is no date for the child's return to the parent's care, and the agency is seeking a facility or treatment setting for ongoing treatment and care. This requires the county or tribal agency to have placement authority through a voluntary placement agreement or court order. The definition of foster care does not require local funds to pay for the cost of payments, for the cost of the placement. So when is crisis respite not considered foster care? Crisis respite is not a foster care placement when, at admission, there is a set date for the child to return to the parent or guardian's care. The service provider's short-term, time-limited behavioral or medical intervention services or relief and support to the caregiver, and plans to return to the child to the care of their parent or guardian within 30 days. So what are the risks of extended crisis respite beyond 30 days? It is crucial to understand that when children remain in crisis respite beyond 30 days without returning to their parent or guardian, this creates a concerning situation. At this point, the child is essentially in foster care, but without formal protection services and oversight that foster care requires. This means that a child may be missing out on important safeguards, such as regular case reviews, court oversight, and access to supportive services. Therefore, it is important to monitor the length of crisis respite carefully and take appropriate steps to either return the child home or formalize the placement as foster care with legal authority. So crisis respite entry in SSIS, the agency shall enter a continuous placement with the placement starting on the date the agency received placement authority. When a child is placed in a licensed children's residential facility, the worker selects residential program from the setting drop-down menu of the placement location absence screen. Crisis respite provided in a Minnesota Department of Health licensed hotel is entered as children's residential program. Workers then must select one of the following options for the reason for placement: treatment for chemical dependency, treatment or services for developmental disabilities, and treatment for severe emotional disturbance. So when crisis respite happens and it is in multiple hotel settings, when an agency utilizes crisis respite in a hotel setting using a shift staff model, every time a child moves into a new hotel, a new service vendor must be created for that hotel and a new placement is entered into SSIS. And each hotel setting is considered a new placement and must be captured that way in SSIS. The physical location is also required to be entered in SSIS for AFGARs, so the service vendor must have the accurate physical address, which would be, in this case, the address of the hotel. So as previously stated, a new service vendor must be created for each hotel used for crisis respite. This setup ensures correct financial tracking and service documentation. While the crisis respite provider is the one you're ultimately paying, the child or youth is staying at the hotel, which is why the hotel must be listed as the service vendor. That's the name that should appear on the placement screen in SSIS. Ensure the physical address of the hotel is accurate, as again, that is required for AFGAR's reporting. This distinction is important for both payment processing and placement reporting accuracy. Okay, any questions on crisis respite? For those that had specific questions, let us know if you have any additional ones. Okay, Andrew. All right, I'm going to answer Tammy's. We have a youth in crisis respite that is being paid by waiver. Do we still need the hotel setups as vendors individually? Yes. The hotel is where the child reflects the physical location. It's hard to place a child in the CRS setting. What do I do if a parent doesn't want her home, doesn't want the child home? Ashley, maybe you can answer that question, or maybe it would.
Yeah, I would recommend that you reach out to our team, and we can do. It sounds like we should do a case consult on that, Andrew. So we'll drop our email in there, and I can drop my email in there and set up a case consultation with you.
Thanks, Ashley. Okay, if the hotel doesn't show as a vendor, are we to complete a vendor setup form? I'm not sure what you mean by a vendor setup form. I'm guessing maybe that's agency specific, Julie. If you have any questions about how to set up that in SSIS, you can email the SSIS help desk. If somebody wants to drop the help desk email in the chat, and one of our fiscal SMEs can help walk you through that process. Okay, to confirm, judge orders a child to 29 days to 180-degree program child return homes. That is considered crisis respite. Ashley, can you answer that question?
For the 180-degree program, you should be looking on licensing lookup to see what type of a program that is. As far as I'm aware, 180 degrees doesn't do crisis respite.
So that should be entered as a placement, and placement authority should be obtained. for that full 29 days, which it sounds like they did it. There was a court order.
Right. Yep. I would agree.
Yep. So Audrey, let us know if we answered that question for you. How does that work if setting up the hotel as a vendor when we are not paying the hotel but a separate agency? So Sharon, I think that's again would be helpful for you to contact the help desk so that they can help you understand how to set that up. Or if Holly or Sam are on and can help answer that briefly. Or you can email the help desk, and one of the fiscal SMEs can help explain how to set that up. Okay, any other questions? So Faribault Martin has run into the same concern with voluntary placements and parents not wanting their child to return home. So Janelle, I think that's a good, anytime you have that situation and you're not sure the next steps to do, please reach out to the foster care policy and they can help do a case consult with you to help you determine your next steps. Okay, any other questions? All right, we will move on to QRTP placements. So as part of the updates in SSIS, one of the things, a new change is a new question on the placement screen. So as part of those updates, there's also a change in how SSIS determines QRTP placements. This was previously determined by the placement setting and reasons, and this logic is no longer used. Now, when entering a placement in SSIS, workers will see a new question on the placement screen, which states, is the BizOrg provider certified to provide QRTP services? So when to answer that question, it's important to understand that this question must be answered anytime the following two conditions are true. The placement setting is either residential program or group home staff operated, and the placement reasons is one of these six: corrections, evaluation, shelter, treatment for chemical dependency, treatment for severe emotional disturbance, and treatment or services for developmental disabilities. So if the answer to this question is yes, then the system will trigger QRTP related data cleanup messages, display alerts and reminders, and enable Title IV claiming features tied to QRTP requirements. So previously in the system, when it was the setting reason combination, workers received those data messages, cleanup errors, data cleanup messages and alerts and reminders for all of those placements. Now those will only appear when the answer to the question of, is the BizOrg provider certified to provide QRTP services, is yes. So again, the setting and reasons still matter, but only to trigger the appearance of the QRTP question. The actual determination of QRTP status in SSIS comes from the worker's answer to the certification question. So how to know if a provider is QRTP certified? To determine whether a provider is QRTP certified, workers should use the DHS licensing information lookup that we previously talked about. It's a tool online to view what services the provider is licensed to offer, and or contact the provider's intake or admissions staff directly. If the provider is confirmed as QRTP certified, then staff should ensure all QRTP documentation requirements are completed and entered into SSIS. This includes elements like the QRTP assessment, family and permanency team, 60-day court approval, and appropriate case planning steps. It's critical for compliance and claiming purposes that the certification question is answered accurately and that all necessary follow-up actions are completed in SSIS if the provider is QRTP certified. So this slide highlights an important distinction in how QRTP services are offered and how these services must be offered into SSIS. So Minnesota's QRTP certified providers offer various services, but not all are certified as QRTP. Because of this, workers must verify whether the specific service being accessed by the child or youth is QRTP certified. Just knowing that the provider is certified is not enough. The specific service must be confirmed as QRTP. For example, some QRTP certified providers offer shelter services, but these shelter services may or may not be QRTP certified. When a child or youth receives QRTP services, best practice is for the agency to enter this QRTP placement in SSIS. Under this practice, there may be times when multiple placements will need to be entered in SSIS for a child or youth receiving services with the same provider. So when a child or youth is placed at a facility that offers both non-QRTP and QRTP certified services, and the youth accesses both types, SSIS must reflect two separate placement entries, one for the non-QRTP certified service, like shelter, and one for the QRTP certified service. Even if both services are delivered at the same physical location, they must be documented separately in SSIS. Why? Because the system tracks QRTP status based on the placement record itself. If the QRTP placement is not entered separately, some Title 4E claiming elements for QRTP services may be missed. So to ensure proper federal claiming and compliance with QRTP requirements, it's best practice to verify the specific services certification status and create separate SSIS placements when both certified and non-certified services are accessed, even when they are the same provider. So I'm just looking at the questions here. If we need to go back and update for current placements, or are they updating current QRTP? So I'm assuming you're asking about the question. That is moving forward with placements after the 25.2 release. So any new placements need to be, the question needs to be answered. What happens when the youth is doing a 30-day evaluation at Northwoods in the unit that is not a QRTP, but another part of their program is a QRTP? So Kimberly, that would be if they're in the just making sure I'm understanding this right. If they are in the 30-day eval program and that is not a QRTP service, and then they move into Northwoods program that is QRTP program, you would enter a placement for the 30-day eval and then enter another placement when they move to the part of the program that is QRTP certified. So Carrie, yep, if that is two placements, if the youth is in a QRTP eval, then moves to QRTP residential in the same program, is this two placements entered? I'm going to ask somebody in policy to verify that. I'm going to say yes, because that's two separate QRTP services, but yes, Ashley says yes. So that is, yes, that would be entered two separate placements. Again, if you have further questions, you can always ask the foster care policy. So there's another question about if both services are provided are QRTP, would we only need one placement entry? My understanding is that you would need them both because they're separate QRTP services, two separate QRTP placements. So you would need two separate QRTP documentation. If a child is in foster care, goes to a QRTP, then goes back into foster care, is that 3 continuous placements, not 3 locations? So that's not continuous placement. An important distinction is the continuous placement is the overall umbrella of the placements. It's from the time the agency receives authority until it no longer has authority. So in between there, you have the placements, locations, and absences. So it would be three separate placements under one continuous placement. If your agency did not lose placement authority during that time, you'd have a placement for foster care, placement for QRTP, then placement for foster care, all under that continuous placement umbrella. This, I'm assuming what Kim has here is a follow-up for a question for the PRTF, but I don't know, which we are going to be going over PRTFs next in our presentation. So hopefully we can answer that question. When paying the facility, how do we know if they are receiving QRTP services in order to pay it correctly? When paying the facility, how do we know if they are receiving QRTP services in order to pay it correctly? I am not familiar with payments, Brenda, but maybe one of our fiscal SMEs can help out with that question. If you can enter it into the chat, that would be helpful. Any other questions about QRTP placements? All right, I think Allie is going to take over for PRTFs.
Thanks, Erica. All right, we will get started going over PRTFs. So psychiatric residential treatment facilities, or PRTFs, are licensed residential programs that provide an inpatient level of mental health care for children and youth under age 21. These are not hospital settings, but they offer a structured 24/7 treatment for individuals with significant emotional or psychological needs. It's important to note that in SSIS, PRTFs are always shown as locations and may not always require a continuous placement episode. When a child or youth is placed only in a PRTF, the placement is not reportable to AFCARS, and therefore it does not require continuous placement in SSIS. Since PRTFs are not categorized as foster care, agencies do not need placement authority. In addition, out-of-home placement plans and court reviews are not required. This distinction helps ensure that SSIS records are aligned with federal reporting requirements. When a child or youth is in a PRTF and the plan is for them to discharge into a foster home or a residential program that does qualify as foster care, the agency must prepare accordingly. This means obtaining placing authority for the subsequent placement. Once the youth leaves the PRTF and enters a new placement, a continuous placement and subsequent placement record must be entered in SSIS. Because this new setting falls under foster care, out-of-home placement plans and court reviews are also required to comply with legal and policy standards. If a child or youth is placed in a foster home, residential program, or another setting, and then moves into a PRTF while the agency maintains placement authority, the PRTF placement must be entered into SSIS. The existing continuous placement remains open, starting from when the placement authority was first obtained. Agencies must continue to meet out-of-home placement plan and court review requirements during the PRTF stay, since the overall placement authority has not changed. All right, questions on PRTF? All right, and Russ pulled up our next slide just with some resources that were mentioned earlier in the presentation. The first link is the new Entering Child Foster Care Placements into SSIS worker documentation that was updated in May of 2025. So that's the most up-to-date information that we have. And then the next link there is just to our main SSIS worker documentation page, which has documentation on numerous different topic areas, many of which have also recently been updated. So be sure to check that page out. And then Ross, I think I will pass it back to you.
Allie, there's just a couple of questions. I was
Oh,
answering the questions, but I was on mute.
oh, okay.
It doesn't do good when it's on mute. So I see Kimberly asked again if they should be entering PRTF as a location if it happened several months ago. That depends on if your agency had placement authority. So if your agency did have placement authority, yes, it should be entered. Brenda, I'm not sure if you've seen in there that Holly did answer your question about how to determine if the QRTP, how to determine when making payments for a QRTP. Kathy noted child would need a diagnosis code entered as well as a mental health assessment. I'm guessing that means for a PRTF, but that should be completed to determine if a PRTF is appropriate. If a child has been in court-ordered foster care for over a year, then is court-ordered into PRTF. How is that handled with the continuous placement episode? So I think we answered that, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly, Erica, that if the child is in court-ordered foster care for over a year, then is in court-ordered into PRTF. If your agency retains placement authority through that court order, then your continuous placement remains open until your agency no longer has placement authority. And then, is there a checklist that has been created for entering a placement? We do not have a checklist. We do have our on our SSIS worker documentation that explains how to enter the placement in SSIS. But if you're looking specifically for a checklist kind of for policy and practice, that may be a question for either the help desk or the foster care policy. But I'm not aware of a checklist that has been created for entering a placement when you're combining with SSIS documentation and policy practice. Will there be any upcoming trainings on QRTPs regarding specific timelines, court orders in reference to meet for eligibility guidelines? I believe, and maybe Ashley or Tendai can verify, I believe that they have a series of summer webinars, and I believe the QRTP webinar is slated for September. Yes, thank you, Erin. Any other final questions regarding SSIS placement entry before we wrap it up today? And if after this you have any further questions about SSIS placement entry or placement entries in general, you can always email either the SSIS help desk or the foster care policy unit, and we will be happy to help you. And I think this is back to you, Ross.
Yes, it is. All righty. Well, thanks. We're going to talk about the next coffee talk. And if you notice, it'll be in August. So there will be no July coffee talk. So save the date for August 19th. And the next one will be on the statewide release for version 25.3.
And Russ, just a note, Ashley did put registration for the future webinars on QRTP in the chat. So sign up for them. Those will be very helpful.
All right. Well, thank you all for spending your morning with us, learning this important information. And we'll see you on the next one. Stay golden, Minnesota. Radio Ross out.